Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Nelson, here on this Thursday afternoon. On time this time, actually, for those of you guys who are on the live segment, because I did not get held up in a meeting this time, so yay. And another good reason why today is a good day is that tomorrow is the start of the NBA season. So let's go. Finally, we're going to have NBA basketball. We still have, the WNBA has definitely kept me entertained for long enough with basketball news, as well as the Olympics. So there was basketball going on basically all year round that we could talk about. But now we're going back to focusing on the NBA. And since tomorrow is opening night, the first segment we're going to do is talk about my predictions for who's going to win the game that is going on tomorrow. And it should also be noted, some of the times of this game and, when these games are happening. And I'm just going to go over that in the first segment. And then in the second segment, I'm going to be doing a full injury report on every single player on every single roster. So anyone that is injured, I'm just going to give you guys exactly, what the status is on their injury. And that was mainly inspired because Luka Doncic recently suffered a calf injury. So I'm just going to go ahead and I might as well talk about all the teams that have injury problems to start the season. And then in the third segment, we are going to talk about some offseason moves that could end up being detrimental to a lot of teams and their seasons. And that's also what's going to be the fourth segment because I don't think I can cover everything just in one segment. And we also have a special fifth segment that I reveal at the end of the fourth segment, so be sure to stay tuned. And figure out exactly what that is. Hiccups, excuse me. So before I begin, I do like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you guys have a burning question, a hot take for the game, something that you've just been dying to share. We are all ears. If you really want your comment or question to get noticed, then I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $sign below the chat box, and you can send in your comments and or donations that way. And it really helps the show. If Super Chat isn't really your thing, then that is okay. You can always use the link displayed below the ticker on every single show segment, which is gsmcpodcast.net, and then you can send in your comments or donations that way if Super Chat's not your thing. Either or, it really helps the show. And with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about these NBA games that are going to be happening tomorrow, and they're going to be happening a little bit early. One game is happening early and another game is happening rather late. So the Nuggets and the Celtics are going to open today at 12 p.m., so literally at noon. And then the Lakers and the Timberwolves are going to match up at 10:30 p.m. And excuse me. Notice how these schedules are trying to adapt to football and their schedule as well. Because NCAA football, and on Friday, there's going to be two major games that are going to be happening. Oregon's going against Michigan State, and Syracuse is going against UNLV. And that there is a chance that could eat up some of the viewership for a lot of NBA fans, because again, the NBA struggles to compete with the NFL. The NFL is America's top sport, and the NBA really struggles to compete in terms of viewership. So trying to avoid a primetime game during when football is going on is a big W for the NBA, and it's exactly what the WNBA should do. Don't understand why they're not doing that, but regardless, I mean, that's whoever's in charge's fault, I guess. But these times are the timing of these games is perfect for adapting to college football and the schedule for a lot of these football games. And that's sort of what you're expected to do. Since the Lakers are playing at 10:30 p.m., right? Chances are the college game that starts at, I believe, 7 is going to already conclude, or that starts at 9, excuse me. It's going to conclude, or if it comes down to the wire, then maybe it won't conclude. But the NBA game would still be going on, And then once the college game ends, then people are going to tune into the NBA. So that works perfectly. And that's really like sort of how the scheduling should work with these games. But anyways, you guys don't really worry about the schedule. Let's go ahead and pick the teams that I think are going to win. So we're going to start with the Laker game because I feel like that's what a lot of people are going to be more interested in. As we know, my glorious king, LeBron James, La Sunshine, whatever you want to call it, is going to obviously be playing tonight along with Anthony Davis, and they match up against the Timberwolves. Now, obviously, if this Timberwolves team didn't just recently do an offseason trade to get rid of Karl Anthony Towns, I probably would have picked the Timberwolves to win this game because they already made it to the Western Conference Finals with the team that they had, and I feel like going and matching up against the Lakers wouldn't be that big of a deal for the Minnesota Timberwolves. However, now that they acquired Randall, it's going to be an adjustment period, and Randall obviously has to get some team chemistry with the rest of the team, and that chemistry, it might not come so early in the season. Like, it usually takes it takes some time for, like, you know, the chemistry to be built and good coherency in a roster that just recently traded their second best player for another option. And because of that, and because of the adjustment to coaching with the Lakers and how the Lakers are going to run their offense under JJ Redick, I feel like the Lakers could sneak in a win to opening night against the Timberwolves. And the reason why I say this, I have a couple of reasons. One, LeBron James. Obviously, LeBron James is the biggest reason. As you guys know, he is the best player in the NBA and the best player in NBA history. Now, he did not win the MVP last year, but this Olympics has sort of proven that he is still a top 5, at the very least, player in the NBA. And, I mean, while the team hasn't necessarily made any additions to their roster that could ensure that they are going to be better than they were last season, despite that, I think this coaching change and the way that JJ Redick wants to utilize each player and their offense is exactly how you need to counter Rudy Gobert. Because JJ Redick is a firm believer in spacing and running a team that has a bunch of shooters, because he sort of wanted to go into the season running a 5-out. And because of that, that is going to automatically hinder Rudy Gobert's productivity on the defensive side of the ball. So if they can hit their threes and if they can get clean looks and open shots, and if they hit those open shots, then they could easily win this game. And, well, not really easily, but they could come out on top in this game if they're able to hit enough threes. And with the offensive system that they have in place, I think it's a perfect counter for Rudy Gobert and his play style. So I'm picking the Lakers against the Timberwolves in this opening night. It's a really big risk, but I do feel like this Lakers team is going in the right direction with their offensive set and utilizing the players to the best of their ability. Now, the next team on this list, and the next team that I might as well talk about, the next game that's going to happen is the Nuggets against the Boston Celtics. So, previously, Jason Tatum has said that when the Nuggets got eliminated by the Timberwolves, that was when he and the Celtics knew that they were going to win the NBA title. And the reason for that is because Jokic isn't really the best matchup that they want to go up against in the finals. Like, that matchup would have killed them. And that matchup also destroyed the Celtics in the regular season twice. So I have no doubt that that's what's going to happen in this game. The Nuggets did lose KCP, so that could hinder the three-point shooting, but they still have the main core that makes this team run with Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, Aaron Gordon, and Michael Porter Jr. So with all of those players on the roster and the fact that the Nuggets can match up pretty well against the Boston Celtics, I think the Nuggets are going to come out of this game with a win. Now, the Nuggets play way earlier than the rest of these, than any of these teams later that are going to play. They play at 12 p.m., so at noon. So probably not going to. Actually, no. I could probably tune into this game and see exactly what the stats are and like what's going on and what the story of the game is while I'm live. I might do that. Not entirely sure. I'll think about that. But there's also another game that's scheduled to happen at 9 o'clock. Now, it's the Utah Jazz against a team called the New Zealand Breakers. That's what it says on the Fox app. So I have obviously never heard of the New Zealand Breakers. And it would be ludicrous for me to say that the Utah Jazz don't win this game, considering how they are an NBA team and the Breakers are an outside of the NBA kind of team. So, really, those are all the games that are going on. Again, I pick the Lakers to win, and I also pick the Denver Nuggets to win. And that's sort of to be... Let me know in the comments who do you guys think is going to win in this game. And give me just all your opinions on what you guys think about opening night. If you guys are excited that the NBA season is coming back. Maybe you guys aren't excited that the NBA season is coming back. Let me know in the comments. But aside from that, we are out of time for this first segment. So now we will go ahead and go into the second segment where I give a full NBA injury report, all of the players that are going to be day-to-day, all the players that are going to be injured, all the players that are going into this season injured for every single team in the NBA. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown. Get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, some losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this second segment, we are going to be going through a full injury report of all the teams. So essentially like where they stand in the injury status, where players stand in the injury status, and we're probably going to have to speed through a lot of it because, again, like there's a lot of NBA teams. So I'm just going to do a full injury recap and all the players that are going to be out in the beginning, all the players that are day-to-day, and everything else. So with that out of the way, actually, before I begin, I do like to remind everybody that we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you guys have a hot take or a burning question. We are all ears. If you really want your comment or question to get noticed, I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $sign below the chat box, and then you can send in your comments and or donations. That way, really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. And let's go ahead and go through this injury breakdown. So I'm going to be going through alphabetical order, as per usual, and I'm going to speed run through all of this, and I'm going to say day-to-day, and I'll just, explain, like, what kind of injuries they have for this day-to-day. So we start with the Atlanta Hawks. So Seth Lundy, he's a guard. He's going to be day-to-day, and it's apparently an ankle injury that is going to be, as he was limited in training camp this week. And Onyeka Okongwu, I always mess up that last name. has a toe injury and is not 100% healthy, so he's also going to be day-to-day. The Boston Celtics, Kristaps Porzingis, obviously one of the more important pieces of the Boston Celtics, and he underwent surgery. He has a foot injury, and it's a very rare injury that's going to most likely sideline him until December 1st. That's his estimated return. Bojan Bogdanovic for the Brooklyn Nets has a foot injury and is said to be day-to-day, and his estimated return is going to be on October 23rd when he's going to be playing full minutes. Now, for the Chicago Bulls, Lonzo Ball, he's been injured for a very long time, and with a knee injury, he's had several setbacks throughout his career, and he's going to be day-to-day with an estimated return on October 8th. Again, he's going to be day-to-day. Giddey on the Chicago Bulls as well. He's going to be day-to-day after suffering an ankle sprain during the Paris Olympics. And those are all the players on the Chicago that are injured. Dallas, this is actually the big team, and the reason why I actually decided to do this. So Luka Doncic recently underwent a calf injury on Monday's preseason opener against the Grizzlies, and obviously, he's going to be day-to-day. His estimated return is going to be on October 24th. Kyrie Irving's estimated return as well is going to be on October 24th, as on Monday he said that he surgically repaired his left hand and is doing much better ahead of training camp. He's also going to be day-to-day. Maxi Kleber is another player that's going to be day-to-day, power forward for the Dallas Mavericks, suffered an ankle sprain. And Kessler Edwards is also going to be day-to-day, as he also has a sprained ankle. Now, for the Denver Nuggets. Now, no one important for the Denver Nuggets is essentially hurt. However, Peyton Watson, a forward, is going to be day-to-day, and he wouldn't participate in Thursday's practice due to a hamstring discomfort. Deron Holmes II is going to be out with an estimated return until July 1st. So that could affect their center depth, but again, Jokic is a monster, so I wouldn't be surprised if they'll be fine. Jalen Pickett is expected to return on October 4th, same with Peyton Watson, and they're both going to be day-to-day, and Pickett did not play on Saturday's Summer League game against the Pelicans due to a left groin soreness. Now, for the Pistons, Asort Thompson is going to be day-to-day with an expected return on October 6th. And the Detroit president of basketball operations said on Monday that Thompson's illness will be limited to open training camp this week. And now the Golden State Warriors, they have Andrew Wiggins on day-to-day for October and is expected to return on October 5th, as Wiggins did not participate in Tuesday's practice due to an illness. The Indiana Pacers, Johnny Furphy, forward, is going to be day-to-day, and his estimated return is October 8th, as Furphy is dealing with tweaks to both ankles and did not practice on Thursday, and will not practice today, Now, James Wiseman, who they recently acquired in a trade, is going to be day-to-day as well and is expected to return on October 8th, as the Packers coach Rick Carlisle said on Monday that Wiseman is dealing with a groin injury, or a groin issue. Next, the Clippers. Now, Kawhi Leonard, of course, is going to be day-to-day. This is not new for Kawhi Leonard, but more so here because he suffered a knee injury that ultimately did not allow him to play in the Olympics, and he will be held out in 5v5 action for Wednesday's practice. Mo Bamba for the Clippers is expected to return on October 5th. He is day-to-day, and he did not partake in the scrimmages either. And Trenton Flowers, he's a guard, is expected to return on October 23rd, and he's also day-to-day. Next, the Lakers. Now, the Lakers, they have a lot of players that are injured. Now, Christian Wood isn't expected to return until November 4th. He is out, as he underwent successful arthroscopic surgical procedure on his left knee. So he's going to return on November 4th. Christian Koloko is going to be day-to-day, and his estimated return to health is going to be October 22nd, as he's suffering from an illness. And Jared Vanderbilt is also going to be day-to-day, estimated to return October 22nd. He has a foot injury. Cam Reddish is going to be day-to-day, expected to return on opening day, but still he's going to be day-to-day. And He did not participate in 5v5 practice on Tuesday due to soreness. And Jordan Goodwin is going to be day-to-day, expected to return on opening night. And he did not partake in Tuesday's practice due to a hamstring issue. So again, might be day-to-day. Next is the Memphis Grizzlies. So Gigi Jackson II is expected to return December 19th. Very important piece for the Memphis Grizzlies. However, they do have Ja Morant healthy. He's not on this injury report. And he underwent a successful procedure to prepare his broken fifth metatarsal. I'm not a doctor, so forgive me if I messed up that word, but he's expected to return December 19th. Vince Williams Jr. is expected to return October 23rd. He's going to be day-to-day, and along with Cam Spencer, who's going to return October 14th. He's also day-to-day, and Jaren Jackson Jr. is also day-to-day, expected to return October 23rd. He's dealing with a hamstring injury as well. Now, next team on this list is the Miami Heat. Josh Richardson is going to be day-to-day and is expected to return October 8th as he has a shoulder injury and is going to be limited at the start of training camp. Chris Middleton is obviously for the Milwaukee Bucks. He is suffering ankle injuries, yes, more than one. He's going to be day-to-day and is expected to return October 6th. And he was participating in everything except live scrimmages on practice. So day-to-day seems to make sense. Julius Randle is going to be day-to-day as well. And he also recently he also had a shoulder injury, which ultimately sidelined him for the majority of the postseason. In fact, throughout the entirety of the postseason and towards the end of the season. And Keita Bates-Diop is another forward that is also going to be day-to-day. And the Knicks traded Diop alongside with Randle, but he has a shin injury this time. So he's going to be day-to-day and he's expected to play October 4th, but still day-to-day. Now, for the Knicks, obviously, Mitchell Robinson, their best... they're one of their best rim protecting centers for the New York Knicks. I do see that comment right there. I'm going to acknowledge that, but I do want to speed through this. Now, Mitchell Robinson, he's going to be out with an ankle injury, expected to return December 1st. OKC, Nikola Topic is going to be out and is expected to return July 1st as he underwent an ACL procedure Wednesday. It was successful, but he's going to miss most of the season. And Kenrich Williams is going to be day-to-day, expected to return October 24th. And so is Alex Dukas, but he's expected to return October 7th. He's also day-to-day. Next, the Phoenix Suns, Ryan Dunn is going to be day-to-day, and he has left knee soreness, and he's still expected to return October 6th, but still not 100%. The Sacramento Kings, Devin Carter, the guard, is going to be out and is expected to return January 10th. And they announced that Carter underwent successful surgery. Trey Lyles, he's going to be day-to-day, expected to return October 24th. And the rest of the players that are day-to-day are Kevin Huerter and Jordan McLaughlin. McLaughlin is expected to also return October 24th, and Kevin Huerter is expected to return October 9th. Huerter has a shoulder injury, and McLaughlin has 2 right ankle sprains. Now, the San Antonio Spurs, Devin Vassell is going to be out until November 2nd. That's his estimated return. He's with a foot injury. Charles Bassey is expected to be day-to-day and returning October 7th with a knee injury. And David Duke is expected to return October 7th. He's going to be day-to-day, and it's undisclosed exactly why he's on the injury report. Now, the Raptors, by far the most injury-riddled team so far. So, Scotty Barnes, he's expected to be day-to-day, and for personal reasons, he will not be available for training camp. And he's expected to return October 6th. Bruce Brown, also going to be day-to-day, expected to return October 23rd. Jacoby Walter, again, day-to-day. Grady Dick, day-to-day. Jonathan Magbo, day-to-day. Ochai Agbaji, day-to-day. DJ Carton, day-to-day. And Chris Boucher, day-to-day. Now, Grady Dick, all the way down, is going to be expected to return October 6th, but Bruce Brown and Jacoby Walter are expected to return October 23rd. And finally,
the Washington Wizards. Saddiq Bey is going to be out and is expected to return December 3rd. And he's just out for up until that allotted time. It doesn't really give any context on why he's going to be out. So that's all the teams that have injuries. And before I go into a break with the next segment, I do want to acknowledge somebody in the chat. Yo, man, his name is Nick. What's going on, Nick? I don't know if you do fantasy football advice, but it seems like you do. Should I start Rashad White or Kareem Hunt? That is a very, very good question, honestly. Now, if you really want a very solid opinion on who you should start, then we do have a fantasy football podcast. So you can go ahead and tune into that whenever that goes live, and you can actually ask the host of that fantasy football podcast to see what he thinks. And you'd get a much better sort of opinion and a much better advice from him than you were to get from me. I do play fantasy football, but that is a very, very solid question that I don't really think I can answer here since it's, basketball podcast. And I think you'd get a lot more out of asking our host for the fantasy football podcast, or even the sports podcast that's going to go live directly after my live. And if you really want a solid opinion on fantasy football, then I recommend tuning into those podcasts and listening to So when will that podcast be? So the sports podcast is going to be directly after my podcast. And so mine should be scheduled to end at around 1:30, and his is supposed to be scheduled to start, I believe, at 2:00. So if you want to tune in immediately and try to get the best advice before the game tonight and before the NFL week starts, I recommend tuning into that sports podcast and asking his opinion and what he thinks who he thinks you should start. And as for the fantasy football podcast, I actually don't really know when that starts. I don't know if that starts after mine or if that even starts, before the game later tonight. So again, if you really want a good football opinion, I recommend going into the sports podcast. He's going to start at 2:00, and you should really tune into that and see exactly what he has to say to that question. So yeah, you'd get a much better answer from him than you would from me. Even though I would honestly, personally, I'd take Kareem Hunt, but again, he might have a different answer. So he might have a completely different answer than I do, and it might be more thought out than I do, because that was a football question that sort of sprung on me. So I apologize for that, but with that out of the way, that is the end of the second segment anyway. So now we can go ahead into the third segment, where I talk about some off-season moves that could end up being detrimental for some teams. So I'll be right back after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we are going to be going over some off-season moves in the NBA that could turn out for the worst for certain teams that ended up doing this move. So we're going to go ahead and start with some honorable mentions. I got this from Bleacher Report, by the way. So it's inspired by Bleacher Report's article. So some sort of, let's see. Let's go ahead and go through this list and get the slides ready. So a couple of honorable mentions, like a couple of moves that could end up backfiring for certain teams is, one, the Atlanta Hawks drafting Zachary Risacher as the number 1 pick. I'm not entirely sure if I'm sold on exactly how good Risacher is and how good Alex Sarr is. And I don't really know exactly which one was the better pick in the draft as of right now. And another thing that should be another honorable mention is, after a foot injury, $90 million per year, Patrick Williams. Is that really the right price? The Bulls could regret that pretty quickly, though an $18 million flat deal could be a discount if Williams ends up blossoming as a player. Right now, they're sort of like betting on Patrick Williams to be good. And similarly, Obi Toppin's 4-year deal with the Pacers seemed a little bit high, 58 to 60 million, depending on incentives. But maybe the deals that haven't been reached prove rather problematic for teams like Houston, who have until the start of the season to extend Sengun and Jalen Green. If both of them blow up, Houston might have to pay a higher price by next July. And that inaction is just as bad as doing something in the offseason. So now we're going to go on to, obviously, the biggest trade so far in recent NBA history. Karl Anthony Towns being traded from the Timberwolves over to the Knicks. Now, this could backfire from the Timberwolves side more so than it can backfire from the Knicks' side, in my opinion. So the Timberwolves, they were fresh off a Western Conference Finals appearance and 3 wins away from the NBA Finals, but they chose to break up the best team that they've ever had in the last 20 years. Let me rephrase that. They chose to break up the best team in the last 20 years. That is a very long time of being bad, being mediocre, having no expectations. That is a very, very long time. And financially, the deal might actually make sense. Randall may fit well, and the team badly needed a guard like Dante DiVincenzo. But is Minnesota going to look back on the 2023 and 2024 season and realize it gave up too quickly on something that was actually working? That's really the big struggle. Because the Knicks, so far, since they've made the second round every single time, they just can't get over that hump yet. So since they haven't had a roster like that, they aren't really losing nearly as much as the Timberwolves. Granted, they both have long stretches of being bad and being non-playoff teams. But again, the Timberwolves, they do have much more to lose because they made the Western Conference Finals in the previous season. Now, next is the Mavericks interested in, investing in Klay Thompson, And obviously, this is another trade. This is another deal that could end up being really, really bad in favor of the Dallas Mavericks. This is another deal that could be really, really bad because we still don't know if Klay Thompson is going to be that kind of guy. We don't know if he's going to be that guy again on the Dallas Mavericks. Now, he could be way more inefficient than what he was last season. And there's also still a lot of scrutiny going into the season because of Klay Thompson going 0 for 10 in the elimination game or something like that, or 0 for 11. I forgot exactly what it was that he shot, but he did not hit a single shot in that game, in that closeout game. And Dallas paying a lot of money to go and grab him, it could be a big risk. However, I'm not entirely sure that's going to happen. I think all of the criticism is just going to inspire Klay to start shooting the lights out against defenses. Now, the Dallas Mavericks, they didn't stand pat as the team that ousted Minnesota before falling to Boston and the Celtics in a 4-1 NBA Finals loss. So instead of adding to what got them there, the Mavericks moved on from wing defender Derrick Jones Jr. for Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson isn't the same kind of caliber, isn't the same defensive player that he used to be, especially after all of those leg injuries. So this would be a no-brainer for Thompson at his best, but a 34-year-old with multiple leg injuries, he's not the same player that he used to be. And the Mavericks have two stars who aren't really good at defense with Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic, and let go of their best defender on the wing for a player arguably on par with the also departed Tim Hardaway Jr. Tim Hardaway did not play well in the postseason, however. Now, Minnesota and Dallas didn't value continuity, and their choices may lead to different teams in the next Western Conference Finals. Because, again, new teams, just newly generated teams, they don't really mesh well right off the bat, if that makes any sense. And that's sort of one of those things where it's like, this could end up being really bad, or this could end up being really good. And I believe there's time for one more team that I can do. Now, we're going to do the next team that is obviously could have big problems going into this next season. Talked about them for a while now, the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, the Los Angeles Lakers' inaction during the offseason could really, really be detrimental to this team and their success. And what do I mean by that? So, since I mentioned previously on the previous podcast that they lack depth at the center position. And the fact that they didn't bother going to acquire a center, it means they're going to be relying on Anthony Davis, more so now, especially because Christian Wood is injured. You guys just heard the injury report. And again, Anthony Davis he just came off of his most healthy season while also playing in the Olympics. So the chances of him getting injured this season with all the since the Lakers are going to rely on him heavily, I'm not entirely sure that's a reliable option. I don't know how I feel about that, because I obviously don't want Anthony Davis to get injured. That would be awful, as not just as a person, really. That would be awful as a human being. But it's really it's sort of like a bind that they're in, because they have to rely on him, but at the same time, if they do, then they might lose him for the whole season. You never know. And the rules of the NBA's new collective bargaining agreement were apparent in 2023, yet LA gave out multiple player options: D'Angelo Russell, Christian Wood, Cam Reddish, and the Lakers could have anticipated their payroll and roster flexibility ahead of July free agency, using others with cap space to dump unwanted salary, like the Detroit Pistons or the Charlotte Hornets, who helped other franchises do that. Instead, the Lakers decided to stick with the same team that didn't really get them all that much success. So, if the Lakers all of a sudden can find success in this roster, this is a huge win for JJ Redick and his coaching. Because if this exact same roster can do better than the exact same roster last year under Darvin Ham, then that just speaks to JJ Redick and his coaching. So that's all that I have for this third segment. Well, not really all that I have, honestly. We're going to go into the fourth segment where I continue to cover the teams that could end up being with the next teams. I'm going to continue covering the next teams who I feel made some rather risky off-season moves. There we go. I don't know what was wrong with my English there. So I'll continue with this list right after this short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And we're going to go ahead and continue on with the list that I was doing previously of teams that made some risky offseason moves that could end up backfiring for them. Now, we left off with the Los Angeles Lakers, and we talked about their inactivity as opposed to their activity in the offseason. So now we're going to go ahead and move on to a team that actually really surprised me with this trade. in the Pelicans. Now, I know DeJounte Murray, he's in a Hawks jersey now, but he's not going to be wearing a Hawks jersey anymore. As we know, he got traded over to the Pelicans in a very weak trade coming in from Pelicans side. Like, I figured they would give up a little bit more, but they didn't for some reason. Like, the Hawks didn't really... Actually, no, it's a weak trade on the Hawks side, excuse me, because I thought the Hawks were going to get a little bit more out of DeJounte as opposed to what they already got. So, but still, this could end up being a big risk for the Pelicans. And now, the Pelicans, they may be rooting for the Lakers this season. And why do I say that? Because in the trade, the Pelicans gave up the Lakers' 2025 first-round pick. Now, if the Lakers play bad and they're going to have to, and if they get a high seed, then that's another pick. That's a pick that the Pelicans could have used in the draft, but ultimately won't be able to since they traded it away over to the Hawks. So this will be another time where the Hawks could get a really high first-round pick, but that's like it's all dependent on whether or not the Lakers are good or whether or not the Lakers are bad. Now, in a draft, especially in this draft, Cooper Flagg and there are also several strong prospects in this draft, this upcoming draft, but Cooper Flagg is a very, very heavy favorite, especially after his recent performance against the United States team, like the Olympic team. He played really, really well, and everyone was very impressed with him. So he could be a very solid player coming out of this draft class. And the Pelicans, they could have sent a different first, like Milwaukee Bucks' 2025 first-round pick with a top 4 projection, like instead of sending the Lakers pick. The Lakers originally sent that pick to the Pelicans in the Anthony Davis trade, and Los Angeles probably isn't going to be a bottom feeder this season. Now, an injury to one of LA's stars could end up turning that pick into a really high pick in the draft. But still, you're sort of banking on another team to fail. And when the Lakers have a prime LeBron, you know that they are not tanking. If they are tanking with a prime LeBron, there is something wrong with the organization. That's all I'm going to say. Because if you have LeBron in your prime and you're just not doing anything to try to win, why? Just why? It's that simple. But next team on this list. Now, this is coming in from the Spurs. Now, I know Harrison Barnes is in a Kings jersey, but we haven't seen him in a Spurs jersey, so I apologize. I don't do jersey swaps. I don't have that ability to do that. Now, the Spurs, they gave up a pick swap for Harrison Barnes. Now, this could end up backfiring. Now, Detroit Pistons, I did not mean that. So, pick swaps are really abstract. So the Spurs won't be awful in 2031 when Victor Wembanyama should be well into his prime. But was Harrison Barnes a solid vet, but not a really landmark acquisition for San Antonio? Like, I don't really think that's going to really push them over the hump as much as they think it will. Like, is it really worth giving up an unprotected swap that far in the future? Now, what if the Spurs' fortunes change or they have a down year with injuries? Like, what current middle schooler are they risking? Like, this can't be answered for a long time, obviously. But if you look at the Boston Celtics, they ended up with Jason Tatum in 2017. The Nets didn't think that swap would be a problem when they acquired Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce. And with all due respect to Barnes, those two were Hall of Famers. And so doing it for someone who isn't really a Hall of Famer, again, with all respect to Barnes, I don't really think it's not that good of a move. And especially when you consider, like, again, the Nets move was no better, especially in hindsight, because, again, Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Like, are you kidding me? Like, how? But that's besides the point. So next is the Toronto Raptors as they pick up Bruce Brown Jr. and his player option. Now, it's a comparatively low stake. The Raptors picked up Bruce Brown's $23 million player option in late June. He's a very capable veteran, obviously, and he was a very important piece to the Nuggets and their championship team. But he doesn't have a role with the Raptors that really make sense for the current salary that he's making. Now, many around the NBA believe that the Raptors kept Brown to use his contract as a trade asset, and the regret would come in Toronto can't really find a deal by February's deadline. So, unlike a lot of the other teams that are rather devastated with items on this list, it's just money for the Raptors. They're not losing a chance to advance to the NBA Finals or some star prospect 7 years down the line. It's just the opportunity cost of what else they could have done to improve without Brown taking up so much cap space with $23 million in their book. So that's sort of like, it's a real money problem. And that's like, I mean, from the bystander, a lot of people would think, okay, I mean, that's not that big of a deal. But from owner's perspective, paying this guy $23 million, obviously it's going to be a huge deal. Now, the next team is Contavious. Well, not the next team. The next team is the Nuggets, and the fact that they chose not to pay Contavious Caldwell-Pope. Now, from an accounting perspective, letting KCP leave in free agency to the Orlando Magic makes sense, but the Denver Nuggets let 20% of their championship starting lineup leave because of money. So it's like they're proving that they're rather cheap, and other organizations could end up snagging their players if they're not willing to, if the Nuggets don't seem willing to pay some of these players. And the new rules are also restrictive to teams with high payrolls, and Denver already lacked the depth. Now it lacks depth and is down a key starter, which is a very, very big problem. Like that is a huge problem for the Denver Nuggets, because like KCP is a very, very solid shooter, like a very solid shooter, and now he's on the Orlando Magic, and like Orlando, they were a playoff team last season and they lost in Game 7. So they could probably make a deeper run with KCP if they're able to hit a couple of threes. I mean, who knows? Now, the next one is another Denver Nuggets with Jamal Murray and his huge contract as well. So the team gave Jamal Murray a max extension, 4 additional years with $207.8 million. Now, when almost no one will have enough cap room for next summer in order to pay him, the Brooklyn Nets and Washington Wizards are the only team initially projected to have massive spending power and wouldn't have likely been suitors for Jamal Murray. And another thing to take into consideration is that this man is making $207.8 million despite not making an All-NBA team, not even making an All-Star team. Now, his finals performance was absolutely amazing, but again, he hasn't made an All-Star team or an All-NBA team. There's clearly other guards that have proven to be better than him, and you guys know my opinion on Jamal Murray. I mean, I feel like the only time that he really plays like he deserves more money than that, and just like 207 million or even more than 207 million, is when he goes up against the Lakers, where all of a sudden he turns into the greatest basketball player to ever live. Like, the shots that he makes against the Lakers are so insane. His true shooting percentage against the Lakers versus everyone else is insane. Like, it's amazing how well he plays against the Lakers. But from the team side, the logic is to give the stars you believe in the most, so you can win when you can. And it's not necessarily a wrong move, but it could lead to a lot of regrets coming in from the Nuggets. Others in a similar boat, paid more than the open market could bear, could also be the Celtics with Jason Tatum, Detroit Pistons with Cade Cunningham, Orlando Magic with Franz Wagner, and the Cavs with Evan Mobley. And there's no questioning that these players are talented, especially Jason Tatum, who just led the Celtics to a title. It's just the philosophy of paying out max without exploring the path of not paying a max, right? Like, I understand a lot of these players, they deserve to get paid for a lot of the things that they do for the organization, all the sweat, all the blood, all the grinding that they do. I totally understand that, and I'm happy that all of these guys are getting paid. But still, talking about from a business perspective, I feel like you should search other options as opposed to, focusing on that. There's two more moves left, and of course, we have to talk about the 76ers investing in Paul George. Now, the 76ers, they walk a very, very predictable path this summer. They acquire a star in free agency, everyone gets their hopes up, and usually along the line, Joel Embiid gets injured some point or another. And down in the postseason, that's usually when it happens. Joel Embiid gets injured in the postseason. They make it to the second round, and in the second round, they just choke. This is a cycle that's been going on for the 76ers for a very long time, aside from last year where they ended up losing earlier instead of the second round. They lost to the Knicks in the first round. And again, it's just a very, very predictable pattern. The Clippers chose not to bring back George, partly because of the NBA's new economics, but also because the team felt that his production had diminished. And he was an all-star, but one who often missed a lot of time, including some during the playoffs. Now, again, he did lead the Clippers to the only Western Conference Finals appearance of their entire franchise's history, but still, that doesn't deny the fact that he's also been injured a little bit in the postseason. Now, Philly's most significant problem has been getting into the postseason healthy. Now they add another player that's also injury-riddled, and it's like, how do you expect a team that's injury-riddled to be ready for the postseason? Like, you'd have to get very, very lucky. Like, it's very, very lucky, especially with this kind of team, because Joel Embiid has only played one postseason series where he ended up participating in every single win of that postseason series. He's been injured in every single postseason series, and that's really going to be their biggest problem. And finally, we have the Sacramento Kings and dealing with DeMar DeRozan. Now, the big question is DeMar DeRozan a good fit for this team? With DeMar DeRozan on the roster, along with Sabonis and along from De'Aaron Fox, those are three of your best players who aren't really known as dominant three-point shooters. So the lack of spacing might actually hurt the Sacramento Kings more so than these players might actually help the team. And in an era where a lot of teams shoot threes, that's very risky relying on the two-point mid-range jump shot that DeMar DeRozan loves to shoot. And again, it could really just affect the spacing of this team. Now, DeRozan, he's made a career in feasting in the mid-range without relying heavily on a three-point shot. But will that be available next to the Kings' pre-existing duo Sabonis and De'Aaron Fox? Because again, they also prioritize inside of the arc. So adding another player that prioritizes inside of the arc, it's like, where are we? Are we in the 1990s? And Coach Mike Brown should be able to manage his rotations to sort of offset the duplication over the course of the regular season. But it may be an issue in the end game when they get to the postseason where teams exploit their lack of three-point shooting. And does DeMar DeRozan really help the team where it arguably needed more support on the defensive side of the ball? Not entirely sure, because that was a big problem for the Kings last season. Their defense, it wasn't all that good. And now that they add DeMar, who isn't really known as a solid defender, who's just known as an offensive scorer, and even then, a rather inefficient offensive scorer considering his shot selection, inefficient in terms of shot selection, and inefficient in the postseason, by the way, I don't really know exactly how this team is going to fit. But I digress. We'll see how that goes into this season. That's all that I have for the offseason moves that could potentially backfire. So finally, we are going to go into the last segment where I talk about a very interesting loophole that the New York Knicks used in order to be able to get and acquire the star center in Karl Anthony Towns. It's a very, very interesting way that they did that, and it's a very surprising loophole, and it's like, it shows that the Knicks are like a lot smarter than you think they are. So I'll be right back after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned. And we are back with the fifth and the final segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this final segment, we are going to be acknowledging a loophole. Well, not really acknowledging, more like analyzing a loophole that the New York Knicks use in order to make this trade between the Timberwolves and the Hornets and the Knicks possible to acquire Karl Anthony Towns. It's a very, very, very interesting loophole that they use in the new CBA rules. So I'm going to go ahead and read this article, and that sort of explains exactly how they use this loophole. So again, to strengthen the roster in the upcoming season, the Knicks made a bold move in acquiring Karl Anthony Towns from the Minnesota Timberwolves. Now, to land Towns, the Knicks had to give up key players like Julius Randle and Dante DiVincenzo. However, the trade has sparked even more attention due to an interesting revelation about how the Knicks pulled off the deal, according to a report from Fred Katz of The Athletic. The Knicks found a very clever loophole in the NBA's collective bargaining agreement, CBA rules, and this involves, avoiding first apron / second apron and actually being able, you can't really do certain trades if you're in a certain apron, and you can't give certain players certain contracts with the new CBA rules. This is sort of to limit super teams as well as to limit teams, getting ridiculously stacked rosters, even though the Celtics are just like, forget it, we're made out of cash. But aside from that, the Knicks roster is sort of maneuvering faces and NBA scrutiny after Karl Anthony Towns' trade. So the Knicks' clever use of the CBA rules allowed them to execute Karl Anthony Towns' trade while keeping their roster rather flexible. So as part of a creative strategy, the Knicks needed to sign Daquan Jeffries, Charlie Brown Jr., and DeJuan Washington Jr. to contracts that exceed the minimum salary by $1. Because in one of the CBA rules, you aren't allowed, if you're doing a trade, depending on how it works, again, it's rather complicated, but you aren't allowed to do certain things. So in a certain trade, you aren't really allowed to sign certain players on a veteran minimum and retain the roster that you have. So in order to avoid that, the Knicks technically didn't sign them on a veteran minimum because they signed them for $1 more than the veteran minimum, which is a very, very, very clever strategy. Now, not everyone really supports the Knicks' approach into doing this, as Fred Katz revealed in social media posts that the NBA is not too happy about the team exploiting this loophole. And Katz wrote, "I have heard from various people that the league isn't thrilled about this, but such is the way it goes with new CBAs. The NBA tries to close up loopholes, and then smart people working for teams find new ones." Like, that's one of... I always, my parents always used to say that one of the things that makes America run is finding loopholes. And it's a very, very popular thing that a lot of people try to do. And while the NBA may not be pleased with the Knicks' resourcefulness that has allowed them to add Towns to their roster without really jeopardizing their cap situation, the deal now puts them in a strong position for the upcoming season to encounter strong opponents, just like the Boston Celtics. So this is just a very, very big brain move from the front office of the New York Knicks. This is huge because, again, if they were to sign them to the veteran minimum, then they wouldn't be able to get this trade to go through. So instead of that, they just decided, all right, we'll just pay them $1 more than the veteran minimum. And boom, there you go. They still are essentially paying them the veteran minimum, but not really paying them the veteran minimum. It's a very, very clever loophole that they're using. And again, the NBA isn't happy about this, but such is life. This is what happens when you have an actual competent front office. They can make something happen. And it's honestly like, I was shocked at the fact that this was what the Knicks had to do in order to get this move to work. It was a very, very, very well played move. And obviously, this could end up backfiring them, as I mentioned before. Like, I'm not entirely sold on the Knicks and the acquiring of Karl Anthony Towns, and like I'm not entirely sure how that's going to fare in the postseason. However, this could really mess up with This could mess up the Minnesota Timberwolves, who just made it to the Western Conference Finals with Karl Anthony Towns. So, again, very clever loophole. I just wanted to go ahead and reveal exactly how they were able to get this trade through based off of the new details that we recovered. But aside from that, that is all that I have for this segment. That's all that I have for the show. Thank you so much for tuning into the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. And as usual, we love to hear what you guys have to say during the show, whether you guys have a hot take or a burning question, something you've just been dying to share. We are all ears. If you really want your comment or question to get noticed, I recommend using Super Chat. You just click on the $ below the chat box, and then you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Super Chat's not really your thing. That's fine. You can always use the link displayed below the ticker on every show segment, gsmcpodcast.net, and then you can send in your comments and or donations that way. Either or really helps the show, makes it much more interactive between myself and you guys. That is all that I have today on this show. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit.